Emma Wilson's heels clicked against the courthouse marble as she entered, Ryan's arm linked confidently through hers. Heads turned, exactly as she'd intended. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. Designer suit, subtle jewelry, the picture of dignified wealth about to claim what was rightfully hers. Half of David's $8 million fortune awaited. She spotted David at the plaintiff's table, his posture relaxed, almost unconcerned. Beside him sat Sarah Brooks, his lawyer, reviewing documents with practiced efficiency. Emma squeezed Ryan's arm and whispered, "By this afternoon we'll be celebrating." David looked up, his expression betraying nothing as their eyes met across the room. Something in his calm demeanor made Emma's confidence waver momentarily, but she dismissed the feeling. He had no idea what was coming. She couldn't have been more wrong. Emma Wilson traced her fingertip along the edge of the marble countertop in her kitchen, admiring how the afternoon sun caught the flecks of gold within the stone. $8,000 per slab, she remembered. David had insisted on the best, just as he'd insisted on the best for everything in their sprawling suburban mansion: the handcrafted Italian furniture, the original artwork, the crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls from 14-foot ceilings. Everything perfect, everything cold. She sighed, glancing at the elaborate espresso machine that had required a specialist to install. She'd used it exactly twice. The kitchen, despite its magazine-worthy design, remained mostly untouched. They ate out 5 nights a week, and their housekeeper prepared simple meals the other evenings. Mrs. Wilson's perfect life, Emma murmured to the empty room. The words tasted bitter. What did she actually do with her days? Charity luncheons. Fitness sessions with a personal trainer who complimented her discipline while she counted the minutes. Shopping trips that left her closets full and her mind empty. She wandered into the living room, running her hand over a cashmere throw that cost more than most people's monthly rent. David would be home late again, another dinner with clients. He'd text, not call. He always texted now. When had they last truly talked, or laughed together, or touched beyond the perfunctory kiss on the cheek? Emma caught her reflection in the ornate mirror above the fireplace. At 45, she remained striking, her blonde hair expertly colored and styled, her figure maintained through rigorous workouts, her skin smoothed by regular treatments. She had become, she realized, just another perfect possession in David's collection. She deserved more than this gilded cage. She deserved excitement, passion, life. Mrs. Wilson, I don't believe we've met. I'm Ryan Matthews. Emma turned toward the voice. The charity gala buzzed around them, wealthy patrons in formal attire raising glasses and checkbooks for children's education. Or was it medical research? She'd lost track of which cause they were supporting tonight. The man before her was younger, late 30s perhaps, with dark eyes that held hers a moment longer than politeness dictated. His suit was well cut, but not ostentatious. He held a whiskey in one hand, the other extended toward her. "Emma, please," she said, taking his hand. His grip was firm, warm. "David Wilson is my husband. He couldn't make it tonight. Work, as always." His loss. Ryan's smile revealed perfect teeth. "Though selfishly, I'm not disappointed. It gives me the chance to talk with the most interesting person at this otherwise tedious event." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You don't find discussions about donation tiers riveting?" He laughed, stepping closer. "About as riveting as watching the ice sculpture melt. I notice you've been checking your watch." "Have I?" Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That obvious?" "Only to someone watching you." His gaze was direct, unapologetic. And why would you be watching me, Mr. Matthews? Ryan, please. He mirrored her earlier correction. And to answer your question, because some art deserves appreciation. The line was smooth, practiced even, but Emma found herself responding to it anyway. When was the last time someone had looked at her, really looked, with such undisguised interest? What brings you to these events, Ryan? Business connections? Some business, some pleasure. He gestured around the room. I consult for several companies represented here. But tonight, his voice lowered, I've found a far more compelling reason to stay. Their conversation flowed easily from there, about travel, about the city, about anything except her marriage. When he suggested they continue talking over drinks elsewhere, Emma hesitated only briefly before nodding. My car is outside, she said. 8 million, Emma said, tracing patterns on Ryan's bare chest. The sheets in his apartment were not the 1,000-thread-count Egyptian cotton she had at home, but somehow that made them better, more real. That's what the accountant estimated last year. David's never been fully transparent about his finances, but that's the ballpark. 4 months into their affair, and she was finally sharing details about her marriage, about its ending. Ryan propped himself up on one elbow. And you'd be entitled to half? Under state law, yes. There's no prenup. We married young, before he built the business. Emma smiled. $4 million, Ryan. Enough that we could do anything, go anywhere. We? His eyebrow raised, but his lips curved into a smile. Unless I've been misreading things. Emma kept her tone light, but her heart quickened. Ryan pulled her closer. You haven't misread anything. I want you, Emma. With or without David Wilson's millions. He kissed her, then added against her lips, though I won't pretend the financial security doesn't make the future look even brighter. At least he was honest. David had never been honest about wanting her for herself. He'd simply acquired her like another luxury item. I've spoken with a divorce attorney, Emma said. She says it's straightforward. File the papers, division of assets, done. David won't fight it. He hates public scenes. He'll want it over quickly. And then? Ryan asked. And then we begin. Emma traced his jawline. I'll have my settlement. You'll have your consulting business. We can travel, maybe buy a place in the south of France. No more charity galas unless we actually want to go. Ryan's eyes gleamed. I like how you think, Emma Wilson. Soon to be Emma Wilson, millionaire, she corrected, feeling a thrill at saying it aloud. The papers will be filed next week. My lawyer estimates 3 months maximum. To us, Ryan said, reaching for the champagne they'd opened earlier. And to David Wilson, who has no idea what's coming. Emma clinked her glass against his. To freedom, and the sweet life it will buy. Thank you for approving Chapter 1. Now I'll write Chapter 2, The Fall, based on the detailed specifications provided. Emma Wilson timed their courthouse entrance perfectly. 10:15 a.m., when the morning rush would ensure maximum witnesses. Her charcoal Armani suit projected both sophistication and victimhood, her 4-inch heels clicking authoritatively across the marble floor. Ryan matched her stride for stride, his hand placed possessively at the small of her back. She felt eyes tracking them just as she'd intended. The whispers followed. That's David Wilson's wife, with her lover. Perfect. Let David feel the sting of public humiliation. They passed through the security checkpoint with practiced smiles. The officer's eyes lingered a moment too long on Emma. Recognition, then judgment. She lifted her chin higher. Ready? Ryan squeezed her hand as they approached the courtroom doors. Absolutely. Emma adjusted her diamond earrings. "Just follow my lead." The courtroom was nearly full. More witnesses to David's downfall. Emma spotted him immediately at the plaintiff's table, his posture relaxed, almost indifferent. Beside him sat Sarah Brooks, his lawyer, a slim woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and piercing eyes. Emma guided Ryan to the defendant's table, her arm linked through his, her smile radiating confidence. As they passed David's table, she slowed deliberately, meeting his gaze. "David." Her greeting was cool, civil, for the record. He nodded once, his expression revealing nothing. No anger, no hurt, no fear. Something in his composure made Emma's stomach tighten momentarily. She dismissed the feeling, settling into her chair with Ryan beside her. Her own lawyer, Margaret Chen, leaned over to whisper something, but Emma barely heard her. She was too busy watching David, waiting for the mask to crack. It never did. "Your Honor," Sarah Brooks stood, her voice measured and precise. "Before we proceed with property division, we need to establish which assets are actually subject to marital distribution." Emma leaned forward. This was a standard legal maneuver. Delay tactics. Her lawyer had prepared her for this. Judge Harmon nodded. "Proceed, counselor." Sarah placed a document on the evidence table. "We submit Exhibit A, establishing the David Wilson Living Trust, created 3 years before the marriage to Mr. Wilson's first wife, Caroline." Emma blinked. First wife. David had never mentioned a previous marriage. "This trust," Sarah continued, "holds ownership of Wiltec Industries and its subsidiary companies, valued at approximately $5.3 million. Emma's lawyer shuffled through papers, clearly caught off guard. Exhibit B, Sarah placed another document down, shows the Wilson Family LLC, established 2 years before Mr. Wilson's marriage to the defendant. This entity holds the real estate portfolio, including the primary residence, valued at $2.1 million. The room began to feel airless. Emma gripped the edge of the table. This couldn't be happening. "Your Honor," Margaret finally spoke, "we were not provided these documents during discovery." "On the contrary," Sarah replied, producing a receipt, "they were included in the third disclosure packet, page 87, which Ms. Chen's office signed for 6 weeks ago." The judge reviewed the receipt, then nodded. "The documents appear to be properly disclosed, Counselor." "These entities," Sarah concluded, "hold approximately 92% of Mr. Wilson's assets and were established prior to the marriage. They are by law separate property, not subject to marital distribution." Emma's heart hammered in her chest. "That can't be right," she whispered to her lawyer. "He can't just hide everything." Margaret's expression confirmed the worst. "They're not hidden, they're protected. Legal entities established before the marriage." Ryan's hand, which had been resting on Emma's knee, suddenly felt heavier. "Your Honor," Sarah finished, "the only assets subject to division total approximately $650,000, of which Mrs. Wilson would be entitled to half. Half of nothing." Emma stared at David, who finally met her gaze across the courtroom. There was no triumph in his eyes, only calm certainty. He had known all along. "This is a mistake," Emma hissed as they pushed through the heavy courthouse doors into the corridor. Her voice echoed off the marble walls, drawing curious glances. "Margaret, fix this. They can't just—" "Emma," her lawyer's voice was firm, pulling her into an alcove away from prying ears. "There's nothing to fix. The trusts and LLCs are ironclad. David protected his assets years before you met. But I'm his wife." The word felt hollow now, stripped of its power. "And as his wife, you're entitled to half of the marital assets. but most of his wealth was never marital property to begin with. Ryan paced nearby, his phone clutched in his hand, eyes darting between Emma and the exit. "So what do I get?" Emma demanded. "After 15 years. Margaret sighed. "The preliminary numbers suggest about $325,000, plus your car and personal belongings." The figure struck Emma like a physical blow. 300,000. Not even enough for a decent condo in the city. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her practiced composure beginning to slip. "I need to speak to David." "He wouldn't do this to me." "Actually," Margaret's voice softened, "this suggests he's been planning for this possibility for a very long time." Emma watched David and Sarah exit the courtroom, walking calmly toward the elevators. Without thinking, she broke away from Margaret and Ryan, her heels echoing as she hurried after them. "David!" Her voice cracked, betraying her desperation. He turned, his expression carefully neutral. "You knew," she accused, "all this time." "I protected what I built," he said simply. "Nothing more, nothing less." The elevator doors opened. David and Sarah stepped inside. "This isn't over," Emma warned, but the tremor in her voice undermined her threat. David held her gaze as the doors closed between them. Emma stood frozen, aware of curious onlookers, of her mascara threatening to run, of the carefully constructed image crumbling around her. "Emma." Ryan's hand on her arm startled her. "Let's go." "We'll figure this out." She clung to his arm as they walked toward the courthouse exit, her mind racing. 300,000. After taxes, barely enough for 2 years of the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. "It'll be okay," Ryan murmured, but she caught the slight hesitation in his voice. "We still have each other." Emma nodded, desperately needing to believe him. "We'll appeal," she said, her voice steadying. "This isn't the final word." But as they stepped into the harsh sunlight, the courthouse looming behind them like a monument to her miscalculation, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that everything was beginning to unravel. "We can still make it work," Emma insisted, stirring her coffee absently. The diner's laminated menu stuck slightly to her elbow, a far cry from the Michelin-starred restaurants she'd frequented just weeks ago. "We just need to scale back our plans." Ryan nodded, eyes flicking to his phone when it vibrated against the Formica tabletop. He checked it quickly, then turned it face down. "Of course we can. We'll just be more creative." A week had passed since the courthouse revelation. 7 days of Emma cycling through shock, denial, and now desperate recalculation. The mediocre coffee and vinyl booth seating were emblematic of her new reality, downgraded expectations. "I've been thinking," Emma continued, leaning forward, "instead of the south of France, maybe we look at more affordable options. Portugal is beautiful, or even certain parts of Spain." "Sure." Ryan's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Portugal could work. Emma noted how he picked at his food, his usual appetite absent. He hadn't stayed over at her place for 3 nights now. Always a work excuse, a early morning meeting, a conference call with clients in different time zones. The appeal might take months, she admitted, but Margaret says we still have options. David can't have hidden everything so perfectly. Ryan's phone buzzed again. Again he checked it quickly. "Who keeps texting you?" Emma tried to keep her tone light. "Just work." He pocketed the phone this time. "Some clients are nervous about the market." Emma nodded, ignoring the twinge of doubt. "When I get the settlement, even if it's not what we hoped for, we can invest it. You're good with investments, right? You've mentioned your clients' portfolios." "Emma." Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand. The gesture felt rehearsed. Let's not worry about all that right now. We'll figure it out. Hollow words, empty reassurance. But Emma clung to them anyway, because the alternative, facing this new reality alone, terrified her more than she could admit. "I have a meeting with Margaret tomorrow," she said. "She thinks the final numbers might be higher than we initially thought." "That's great," Ryan replied, signaling for the check. "Really great." Emma watched him calculate the tip, something he'd never bothered with before when she was paying. Another small sign, another hairline crack in the facade she desperately wanted to believe. Margaret Chen's office was ruthlessly efficient. Clean lines, minimal decoration, nothing wasted. Just like her legal approach. The woman herself sat behind a glass desk, documents arranged in precise stacks before her. "Emma, thank you for coming in." No small talk, no cushioning. Emma had come to appreciate the attorney's directness, even when it stung. "You said you had final numbers?" Emma perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, handbag clutched tightly in her lap. "Yes, the mediation is complete." Margaret slid a document across the desk. "This is the final settlement agreement." Emma stared at the figure circled in red at the bottom of the page. $150,000. "That's it?" Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "That can't be right." "I'm afraid it is." "We challenged the trust and LLC structures, but they were established years before your marriage, with clear documentation showing they were funded with premarital assets." "But 15 years?" Emma whispered. 15 years of my life." "The court doesn't value marriages based on duration alone." Margaret's tone softened slightly. "The law focuses on financial contribution and commingled assets." "What about my contributions?" Emma's voice rose. "I hosted his business dinners. I attended every corporate function. I was the perfect corporate wife." "Intangible contributions are difficult to quantify legally." Margaret adjusted her glasses. "You're also keeping your vehicle and personal belongings." Emma laughed bitterly. "My 5-year-old Mercedes and my clothes. How generous." She stared at the settlement figure again. $150,000. Not even enough for a down payment on a decent condo in the city. Barely 2 years of living expenses at even a drastically reduced standard. "If you'd like to contest this further," Margaret began. "What's the point?" Emma interrupted. "You just said his protections are ironclad." "They are." The attorney was nothing if not honest. "This is actually a reasonable settlement given the circumstances." Emma's eyes burned with unshed tears. She'd gambled everything, her marriage, her reputation, her future, on the assumption of millions, on Ryan's promises of a new life together, on false security that was evaporating before her eyes. "Do I need to sign something?" Her voice sounded hollow. Margaret pushed a pen and another document across the desk. "Here. Once signed, the funds will be transferred within 5 business days." Emma's hand trembled slightly as she signed her name. 15 years reduced to a single signature and a paltry sum that would evaporate all too quickly. "What happens now?" she asked, more to herself than to Margaret's. The attorney closed the folder. "That's entirely up to you." Emma let herself into Ryan's apartment with the key he'd given her months ago. The settlement news sat heavy in her chest, but at least she could take comfort in their relationship. They would figure it out together, adjust their plans, find a way forward. His apartment was quiet. She'd texted that she was coming over after her meeting, but he hadn't responded. Probably in the shower, she reasoned, setting her purse on the kitchen counter. She poured herself a glass of wine, one of the bottles she'd brought over from her own collection. The rich Cabernet had once been an everyday indulgence. Now it felt like a luxury she could ill afford to waste. Ryan's phone lay on the coffee table, lighting up with an incoming message. Emma glanced at it reflexively, catching a name, Mike, and the first line of a text. She shouldn't look. She knew she shouldn't. She picked up the phone anyway. The message preview showed just enough to make her heart stop. "So, when are you dumping her? Now that she's broke, there's no point in—" Emma's fingers trembled as she swiped to unlock the phone. Ryan had never hidden his passcode from her, 4729, and the screen opened to his text conversation with Mike, someone she'd never met but had heard mentioned as a college friend. Mike: "So when are you dumping her? Now that she's broke? There's no point in sticking around, right?" Ryan: "Just waiting for the final settlement number. Meeting her lawyer today." Mike: "You seriously dated her for months just for the money? Cold, man." Ryan: "She's not bad company, but yeah, definitely not worth the trouble anymore. Was hoping for millions, not pocket change." Mike: "What's she getting?" Ryan: "Looks like 150K. Barely worth the effort." Mike: "You still hitting Cabo next month? That blonde from marketing still going?" Ryan: "Wouldn't miss it. And yes, Jessica's definitely in. Emma has no idea." Emma stared at the screen, the words blurring through her tears. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed in the silent apartment. 4 months. All this time, she'd been nothing but a potential payday to him, a means to an end, another Ryan Matthews investment that hadn't paid off. The shower shut off. Moments later, Ryan emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, hair damp. He froze when he saw her. "Emma." His eyes darted to the phone on the floor, then back to her face. "I wasn't expecting you so early." "Clearly." Her voice was surprisingly steady, considering how violently she was trembling inside. "Your friend Mike seems nice. Very supportive of your investment strategy." Ryan's expression shifted from surprise to calculation to a practiced contrition in the span of seconds. "Emma, those texts, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" She picked up her purse, dignity the only thing she had left. "Because it looks exactly like what it is. A man who saw a wealthy woman as his meal ticket and who's now disappointed with the return on investment. Let me explain. Don't bother." Emma moved toward the door, each step requiring immense effort. "You've explained quite enough in those texts. Enjoy Cabo with Jessica from marketing." The betrayal cut deeper than she'd imagined possible. Not because she'd truly loved Ryan. She recognized now that she'd loved what he represented, the escape he'd promised, but because she'd been so completely, humiliatingly fooled. As she pulled the door closed behind her, Emma realized she had nowhere to go. No husband, no lover, no fortune, nothing but the crushing weight of consequences bearing down on her. The fall had only just begun. Emma returned to Ryan's apartment the next morning, determined to retrieve her belongings and confront him properly. The shock of last night's discovery had given way to a desperate hope that perhaps she'd misunderstood, that there must be some explanation. She found him packing. Her key still worked in the lock, but as she stepped inside, she immediately sensed the change. Ryan's suitcase lay open on the living room floor, half filled with clothes. The framed photo of them that had sat on the bookshelf was gone. "What are you doing?" Her voice sounded small, even to her own ears. Ryan straightened, unsurprised by her entrance. "I think it's better if we don't drag this out, Emma." "Drag what out? Our relationship?" She moved farther into the apartment, noting how efficiently he was erasing her presence. "We need to talk about what I saw." "There's nothing to talk about." His voice was flat, businesslike. "Those texts were exactly what they looked like. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by claiming otherwise." "So it was all just, what, a con? A way to get to my money?" Ryan shrugged, continuing to pack. "Not at first, but when you started talking about David's fortune, about how we could share it, yes, that became the point." The casual admission stunned her. "And now that I'm not worth millions, you're just done?" "Emma." He finally stopped packing, fixing her with a coldly practical stare. "What exactly did you think this was? You wanted excitement, an escape from your boring marriage. I provided that. You promised wealth. That didn't materialize." "I didn't promise $4 million, Ryan," he mimicked her voice cruelly. "Enough that we could do anything, go anywhere. Your words, not mine." Emma flinched. "I loved you." "No, you didn't." Ryan zipped his suitcase closed with finality. "You loved what I represented. Freedom from a marriage that had become a prison. Just like I loved what you represented. Access to wealth I haven't earned yet." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Your things are in that box by the couch, and I'll need your key." Emma stared at the small cardboard box that contained the sum total of what she'd left in his apartment: a toothbrush, some makeup, a change of clothes, a book she'd been reading. "So that's it? After everything?" "That's it." Ryan held out his hand for the key. "We both played a game, Emma. We both lost." She placed the key in his palm, their fingers not touching. "Where will you go?" she asked, hating how her voice trembled. "Does it matter?" He opened the door, gesturing for her to precede him out. "Cabo, eventually. But first, I need to wrap things up here. Clients to see, loose ends." Emma picked up the pathetic box of her belongings, dignity the only thing she had left. As she stepped into the hallway, Ryan paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it ended this way." The words sounded rehearsed, empty. "No, you're not," Emma replied, sudden clarity cutting through her pain. "You're just sorry I wasn't worth more." The door closed between them with quiet finality. "The rent is due on the 1st, utilities not included." The leasing agent, a bored woman in her 30s, handed Emma a set of keys. "Building rules are in the packet. No pets, no smoking, no noise after 10. Emma nodded, surveying the studio apartment that would now be home. 600 square feet of beige walls, worn carpet, and fluorescent lighting. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous exactly, but it was a far cry from the gated community where she'd lived with David. "There's a laundry room in the basement. Machines take quarters." The agent's eyes flicked over Emma's designer handbag with faint curiosity before returning to her clipboard. "Any questions?" "No, thank you." Emma forced politeness through numb lips. "Sign here, then." The woman thrust the clipboard forward. "Lease is month to month. 30 days notice to vacate." Emma signed, her normally elegant handwriting shaky. And the agent took the clipboard and headed for the door. "Welcome to Parkview Apartments," she said without warmth, before leaving. Alone, Emma stood in the center of the empty space, her suitcases the only furnishings. The settlement money had finally been deposited, $150,000, minus taxes, minus her lawyer's fees, minus the lease deposit and first month's rent. She'd never had to budget before, never had to think about how quickly money could disappear. She crossed to the window, pulling back the thin vinyl blinds. The view was of the parking lot and the brick wall of the adjacent building. No garden, no pool, no doorman, no security. The movers would arrive tomorrow with the few pieces of furniture she'd kept from her former life. The items that had been definitively hers before the marriage: a dresser, a reading chair, a small side table. She'd sold her jewelry to cover the moving costs. Emma opened her suitcase, removing a cashmere throw that had once adorned her living room sofa. She laid it carefully across the apartment's single built-in counter, a splash of luxury against laminate. In the tiny bathroom, she caught her reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror. She looked thinner, older, the carefully maintained facade beginning to crack. Her roots needed coloring. Her manicure was chipped. Small details she'd never have allowed before. She turned away from the mirror, unable to face the woman looking back at her. The reality of her situation was becoming unavoidable. The settlement money wouldn't last long. She had no job, no skills beyond being a corporate wife, no prospects. She'd built her entire identity on being Mrs. David Wilson and then on being Ryan's lover. Now she was neither. She was nobody. 1 month later, Emma sat at her kitchen table, a second-hand piece she'd found at a consignment shop, staring at the bills spread before her. The harsh overhead light cast shadows across the papers, emphasizing the bold red of past due stamps. The reality of financial insecurity had proven more brutal than she'd imagined. Every expense was a decision, every purchase a calculation. The money was disappearing far faster than she'd anticipated. She'd never worked, never had to. At 45, with no resume, no references, no marketable skills, who would hire her? She'd sent out applications for retail positions, administrative roles, anything that might accept her. So far, silence. Her phone lay beside the bills, its screen dark. No messages, no calls. Her former friends had evaporated once news of the settlement spread. When she'd reached out to them, there had been polite excuses, busy schedules, promises to catch up soon that never materialized. Isolation wrapped around her like a shroud, suffocating in its completeness. In a moment of weakness, she unlocked her phone and opened social media. She rarely checked it now, the carefully curated lives of others too painful to witness. But tonight, she needed to feel some connection, even if illusory. David's company page appeared in her feed. A charity gala. There he was, smiling in a tuxedo, standing beside Sarah Brooks. The caption mentioned their foundation's work helping people rebuild after personal setbacks. Emma zoomed in on his face. He looked happy, unaffected. His life continued unchanged while hers had imploded. The unfairness of it burned in her chest. But beneath the anger lurked something else, a question she'd been avoiding. Had she brought this on herself? The affair, the divorce, the miscalculation about David's finances, the blind trust in Ryan, a cascade of choices, each one leading her here, to this table, to these bills, to this emptiness. She closed the app and set the phone face down. The silence of the apartment pressed in on her. No housekeepers, no gardeners. No staff to buffer her from the mundane realities of existence. Just Emma, alone with her thoughts. What had she valued in her life before? Status, appearances, the envy of others, the carefully maintained illusion of perfection. All of it gone now. She gathered the bills into a neat stack, delaying the inevitable calculations of what she could pay, what would have to wait. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened the edges. Tomorrow she would try again. Send more applications. Make more calls. But tonight, sitting in the harsh light of her bare kitchen, Emma Wilson faced the truth she'd been running from. She had nothing and no one. She had hit rock bottom. And the worst part, the thought that kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling, was that she had no idea how to climb back up. Thank you for approving Chapter 4. I'll now write Chapter 5, Unexpected Wisdom, based on the specifications provided. Emma stood before the apartment building's ancient washing machine, staring at the control panel as if it were written in hieroglyphics. 2 days had passed since her night of reckoning at the kitchen table, and the simple act of doing laundry had become an insurmountable challenge. In her previous life, she'd simply dropped clothes in a hamper, and they'd reappear, clean and pressed, in her closet. Now, she clutched a box of bargain detergent, trying to decipher which settings wouldn't ruin her remaining good clothes. "Cold water for that blouse," said a voice behind her. Emma turned to find an elderly woman watching her with kind eyes. The woman was small, but straight-backed, perhaps in her 70s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun. "I'm sorry," Emma said stiffly. "That silk blouse." The woman gestured to the garment in Emma's hands. "Cold water, gentle cycle, no dryer, otherwise it'll be ruined." Emma bristled. "I know how to do laundry." The lie hung awkwardly between them. The older woman's raised eyebrow made it clear she wasn't fooled. "I'm Eleanor Simmons, apartment 3C, she said, extending a weathered hand. "And you're the new tenant in 2B. I've seen you coming and going." Reluctantly, Emma shook her hand. "Emma Wilson." Eleanor nodded toward the washing machine. "First time doing your own laundry?" Emma's instinct was to deny it, to maintain the fiction of competence. But something in Eleanor's direct gaze made pretense seem futile. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's seen it before." Eleanor stepped forward, motioning for Emma to move aside. "May I?" Too tired to resist, Emma surrendered her laundry basket. Eleanor sorted through it efficiently, separating items with practiced ease. "You're putting cashmere in a washing machine?" Eleanor held up a sweater that had cost more than this entire building's monthly utilities. "I didn't know. Hand wash only." "I'll show you how." Eleanor continued sorting, offering quiet commentary on fabric care. "These need cold water. These can handle warm. Never put these in the dryer." Emma watched, embarrassment giving way to grudging attentiveness. When Eleanor had the first load running, she handed the detergent back to Emma. "Thank you," Emma said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "We all start somewhere." Eleanor gathered her own clean laundry. "If you'd like more help, I'm making soup tonight. Too much for just me. You're welcome to join and ask questions." Emma's initial impulse was to refuse. But standing in the fluorescent-lit laundry room, the prospect of another solitary evening in her barren apartment stretched before her like a sentence. "What time?" she asked. Eleanor's apartment was exactly the same size and layout as Emma's, yet couldn't have felt more different. Where Emma's walls remained bare, Eleanor's displayed framed photographs and simple artwork. Where Emma's space felt hollow, Eleanor's radiated warmth, from the patchwork quilt on the sofa to the mismatched but cheerful dishes in the open shelving. "Please, sit." Eleanor gestured to the small kitchen table as she stirred a pot on the stove. "The soup's almost ready." Emma perched awkwardly on a wooden chair, feeling out of place. She'd changed outfits 3 times before coming upstairs, trying to strike a balance between her usual polished appearance and something appropriate for this modest setting. She'd settled on simple slacks and a sweater, but still felt overdressed compared to Eleanor's practical cotton pants and cardigan. "It smells wonderful," Emma offered. "Just vegetable soup. Nothing fancy." Eleanor brought 2 bowls to the table. "Bread's homemade, though. Made it yesterday." The soup was simple, but delicious. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten something that wasn't restaurant-prepared or microwaved. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, searching for safe conversation. 32 years. Eleanor smiled at Emma's surprise. "Yes, by choice. I could afford something different now, but why move? I know everyone here. It's home." "You could afford something better?" Emma couldn't hide her confusion. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Define better. Bigger? Newer? In a fancier zip code?" "Well, yes. I was a school teacher for 40 years. Saved carefully. Invested wisely. My late husband did the same." Eleanor gestured around the apartment. "But this is everything I need. Why pay for space I don't use, or things that don't matter?" Emma glanced at the photographs on the wall. Eleanor with groups of smiling people, in various outdoor settings, at celebrations. "Those are my former students," Eleanor said, following her gaze. "I still hear from many of them. That one there is from my retirement party 15 years ago." "You seem content," Emma said, the concept feeling almost foreign. "I am." Eleanor refilled their bowls. "Not every day, of course. Life has its challenges, but generally, yes." "How?" The question escaped before Emma could stop it. Eleanor considered her thoughtfully. "By understanding what actually matters. Security isn't about money in the bank, though that helps. It's about knowing who you are and what you can rely on within yourself." "That sounds nice in theory," Emma said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "But in reality, money solves most problems." "Does it?" Eleanor asked gently. "Did it make your marriage happy? Did it make the young man stay?" Emma stiffened. "How do you—" "Small building, thin walls, and people talk." Eleanor's tone remained kind. "I'm not judging, Emma. We all make choices based on what we value." "And now I have nothing," Emma whispered. "You have yourself." Eleanor reached across the table, patting Emma's hand. "Everything else can be rebuilt. But first you need to decide what's worth building." Emma looked around the modest apartment again, seeing it differently now, not as a symbol of limitation, but as a deliberate choice. The objects were few, but meaningful. The space was small, but well loved. "I don't know how to start over," Emma admitted. "I've never been independent." "You start with one step," Eleanor said simply. "Then another. Before you know it, you're walking a new path." "We're not hiring waitstaff at the moment," said Frank Miller, owner of the corner cafe, barely glancing at Emma's hastily assembled resume. "But I do need someone for morning prep and register, 6 to 2, Tuesday through Saturday." Emma nodded eagerly. "I can do that." Frank looked skeptical, eyeing her manicured nails and designer watch, the one piece of jewelry she hadn't sold. "It's hard work. Chopping vegetables, mixing batters, cleaning, not exactly glamorous." "I understand," Emma said, squaring her shoulders. "I'm a quick learner." 2 weeks had passed since her dinner with Eleanor. 2 weeks of practical lessons in everything from household budgeting to basic cooking. 2 weeks of slowly reimagining what her life could be. Pays $12 an hour, plus a share of tips from the counter jar. Frank studied her face, looking for signs of disdain. Emma kept her expression neutral, though internally she calculated how many hours it would take to earn what she'd once spent on a single spa day. "That works for me," she said. Frank shrugged. "Fine. Trial basis. Be here Monday at 5:30. Maggie will train you." Emma's first morning was a disaster. She cut her finger chopping onions, burned a batch of muffins, and nearly destroyed the ancient coffee machine. By noon, her feet throbbed, her back ached, and her clothes were stained with multiple food substances. Not what you expected? Maggie asked during their brief break, not unkindly. Emma rubbed her sore hands. I've never worked this hard in my life. Most haven't who come from where you did, Maggie said matter-of-factly. Question is, will you be back tomorrow? Emma thought about Eleanor's words. You start with one step, then another. I'll be here, she said. Gradually, painfully, Emma learned. Her chopping became more efficient, her register skills improved, and she stopped viewing customers' casual thanks with surprise. There was dignity in this work, something she'd never understood before. You're getting better, Frank commented one morning 3 weeks in, as Emma expertly arranged a display of muffins she'd baked herself. Thank you, she said, feeling a small surge of pride that had nothing to do with status or appearance. That evening, Eleanor joined her for dinner in her apartment, a simple meal Emma had prepared on a table set with thrift store dishes. I have news, Emma said, pouring them each a glass of inexpensive but decent wine. Frank offered me additional hours managing the cafe's social media and updating their website. Apparently my eye for presentation is useful after all. That's wonderful, Eleanor beamed. Emma nodded, stirring her pasta thoughtfully. I saw them today, women I used to know from my old life. Oh, how did that go? They were having lunch at the cafe. Didn't recognize me at first. I was behind the counter. Emma smiled ruefully. When they did, they were so awkward, full of fake sympathy and uncomfortable smiles. And how did you feel? Eleanor asked. Emma considered the question carefully. A month ago, I would have been humiliated. Today, I realized I don't need their approval anymore. I'm earning my own way now. She looked around her apartment, still modest, but gradually filling with simple items she'd chosen herself. Books from the second-hand store, a small plant on the windowsill, a hand-knitted throw Eleanor had taught her to make. I'm not saying I wouldn't like more money, Emma admitted, but I'm finding other kinds of wealth. Eleanor's eyes shone with quiet pride. That, my dear, is the unexpected wisdom most people never discover. Emma raised her glass. To new beginnings. And for the first time in months, she felt something like hope. Emma spread her financial records across her kitchen table, now adorned with a simple cloth runner she'd found at a thrift store. Her budget notebook, a far cry from the Italian leather planner she'd once carried, lay open beside a calculator and a mug of tea. 3 months of consistently paying all bills on time, she noted, showing Eleanor the careful tracking system she'd developed. And I've managed to put aside almost $600 in savings. Eleanor nodded approvingly from her seat across the table. That's excellent progress. Emma's apartment had transformed over the past month. Though still modest, it now reflected deliberate choices rather than desperate circumstances. Bookshelves made from crates and boards housed a growing collection of second-hand books. A small potted herb garden flourished on the windowsill. Photos, not of status symbols, but of meaningful moments with Eleanor and her new colleagues, decorated one wall. Frank's given me more responsibility at the cafe, Emma continued, circling figures in her notebook. He's implementing my social media strategy, and our weekend traffic is up 20%. I've noticed the increased crowds, Eleanor said. Your breakfast special photos make my mouth water every time. Emma smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment entirely different from her former pride in possessions. I'm thinking of asking for a small raise and proposing expanded hours for the cafe. If we opened for early dinner service Thursday through Saturday, we could increase revenue significantly. And your commission along with it, Eleanor noted. Exactly. Emma pointed to her projected income calculations. If I continue at this rate, I should have a 3-month emergency fund by summer. Then I can start looking into some community college courses in business and marketing. You've come a long way from that first day in the laundry room, Eleanor said gently. Emma looked around her apartment, remembering the empty shell it had been. I thought I'd lost everything. But looking back, what did I really have? Things. Status. A marriage that was just another transaction. And now? Now I have less, but somehow more. Emma closed her budget book decisively. I know what I'm capable of. I know I can stand on my own. That's worth more than any designer handbag. Eleanor reached across the table, giving Emma's hand a squeeze. That's the kind of wealth no one can take from you. Emma nodded, straightening her papers with newfound purpose. The cafe's hosting a community market this weekend. Local vendors, live music. Frank asked if I'd help coordinate. It could be good exposure, maybe even lead to some marketing consulting for other small businesses. One step at a time, Eleanor reminded her with a smile. But yes, I think you're ready for that next step. Emma's phone calendar showed her organized schedule. Work shifts, laundry day, budget review, coffee with 2 new friends from the cafe. Structure where once there had been only empty hours. Purpose where there had been only drift. For the first time in months, Emma felt not just resigned to her new life, but genuinely hopeful about it. Emma Wilson. The voice from behind froze Emma in place, her hand still reaching for a carton of eggs in the grocery store's refrigerated section. She recognized it immediately. Vivian Pierce, once her closest friend in her former social circle. Emma turned slowly, consciously straightening her shoulders. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face bearing minimal makeup. Nothing like the carefully curated appearance she'd once maintained. "Vivian," she acknowledged with a small nod. "And Diane, hello." The 2 women stood in stark contrast to Emma's current simplicity. Designer handbags, statement jewelry, perfect blowouts, the uniform of their social tier. Vivian's expression held poorly disguised shock, while Diane's eyes swept over Emma's outfit with barely concealed judgment. "We've been wondering what happened to you," Vivian said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "After the, divorce situation." "I heard you had to move," Diane added. "Someone said they saw you working at that little cafe on Maple Street. Is that true?" The question hung between them, laden with implication. In their world, working a service job was the ultimate downfall. 6 months ago, Emma would have been mortified. Now she felt a strange sense of calm. "Yes, I'm the manager at Corner Cafe," she replied evenly. "Frank, the owner, has given me considerable responsibility for operations and marketing." "Oh," Vivian said, blinking rapidly. "That's temporary, I assume, until you get back on your feet." Emma placed the eggs in her cart, considering her response. "Actually, I'm quite enjoying it. I've discovered I have a talent for business development." Diane exchanged a glance with Vivian. "Well, if you need anything, we'd be happy to help," Vivian finished, reaching out to pat Emma's arm with the same condescending sympathy one might offer a child. "Richard knows several executives who might have appropriate positions available." The old Emma would have grasped at this offer, desperate to reclaim her former status. The new Emma simply smiled. "That's kind, but I'm building something of my own now." She gestured to her modest grocery cart. "The cafe's hosting a community market this weekend. You should stop by if you're free." "A community market?" Diane repeated, as if the words were in a foreign language. "Local vendors, live music, great food," Emma said. "Very grassroots, but that's what gives it authenticity." The conversation lapsed into awkward silence, the gulf between their worlds suddenly apparent to all three women. "Well," Vivian finally said, checking her watch, "we should get going. Tennis lesson at the club." "Of course," Emma replied. "It was nice seeing you both." As they walked away, Emma overheard Diane's whispered, "Poor thing," and Vivian's, "Tragic, really." Surprisingly, their pity didn't sting. Emma continued her shopping, realizing she no longer yearned for their approval or envied their lifestyle. Their values were no longer hers. She had built something real, something earned through her own effort rather than acquired through association. The distinction felt liberating. "The register's off by $73, Frank said, his expression grave as he set the cash drawer on the counter after closing. Emma frowned, double-checking her morning counts against the day's receipts. "That can't be right. I balanced it myself before the lunch rush." "Well, it's short now," Frank replied, not accusatory, but concerned. "Any idea what might have happened?" Emma mentally reviewed the day. The cafe had been unusually busy, with several large groups and a constant line at the counter. She'd handled most of the transactions herself, with only Maggie helping during peak times. As she reconstructed the afternoon, a memory surfaced, a customer with a $100 bill for a $12 order, the distraction of the phone ringing, setting the change aside to handle the call. "I think I know what happened," she said slowly. "Mr. Henderson paid with 100 around 2 o'clock. I made change, but got interrupted before I could give it to him. I put it under the counter to keep it safe." She bent down, checking the shelf beneath the register where she'd placed the money. Nothing. "It's not there," she said, a knot forming in her stomach. Frank's expression hardened slightly. "Are you sure that's what happened?" The implication was clear. With her financial struggles, $73 would be significant, nearly half her weekly grocery budget. Emma could easily claim the customer must have received his change and forgotten. There were no cameras in the cafe. No way to verify either way. The money could simply have disappeared into her purse during a quiet moment, solving her budget constraints for the week. No one would know, except she would know. "I'm positive," Emma said firmly. "Mr. Henderson comes in every Thursday. He always orders the same thing. Let me call him." Before Frank could respond, Emma pulled out her phone and dialed the number from their customer database. A brief conversation confirmed her suspicion. In the chaos of the busy cafe, Mr. Henderson had left without his change, not even realizing the oversight. "He's on his way to pick it up," Emma said, hanging up. "I promised him a free breakfast tomorrow for the inconvenience." Frank studied her face for a long moment. "You could have pocketed that money." "I probably would never have known for sure." "I would have known," Emma replied simply. 20 minutes later, with Mr. Henderson's change returned and the register properly balanced, Emma locked up the cafe. Frank walked beside her toward his car. "There's a community gathering at Riverside Park tonight," he mentioned casually. "Local business showcase. Might be good contacts for our weekend market. Interested in coming along?" "I'd like that," Emma replied, pleased at the professional recognition implicit in the invitation. As they approached the park entrance, the evening sun cast long shadows across the gathering crowd. Emma spotted food trucks, vendor booths, and a small stage where a local band was setting up. She scanned the scene, taking mental notes for their own upcoming event, when a familiar figure near the information booth caught her eye. David. Her ex-husband stood talking with several business owners, a portfolio in hand. He looked exactly the same, confident, composed, successful. Emma froze mid-step, unprepared for this encounter. Frank glanced at her questioningly. "Everything okay?" Before she could respond, David turned and saw her. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for a moment time seemed suspended between them.